Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
To remove the driver's side wiper arm, you can leave the hood down, use a small flat-bladed screwdriver, and gently pry up in this plastic cap. Find the edge, pull it off. There's a 14mm nut under here. Use a 14mm socket, extension, and ratchet. Loosen this up. That off. Then we can lift up on the arm. And now I'll wiggle it back and forth. And it should come right off of the wiper arm shaft. Open the hood, we'll go inside, pull the release. Find the safety latch, release that. Prop rod is under the hood. It's got two positions, one position here and then a service position here. It opens further. Passenger side wiper arm has two mounting nuts. They're 14mm. I'm going to use the 14mm socket and ratchet again. Loosen that one up. Loosen this one up. You might need to hold the wiper arm. Thread it off, it popped right off. Just the spring action of the wiper arm. Lift off the windshield and put it aside. To remove this side corner trim, this will be the same on both sides. Pry it up with a plastic prying tool. You can buy this from 1aauto.com. Once it's up, you can slide it out. Put it aside. There's two push clips on both sides that need to be removed. You can use a small flat-bladed screwdriver, pry it up, pull the clip out. If the center part comes out, that's okay. Just push it back in to reuse it. The center cowl piece is clipped along the edges and then it slides up under the window glass. So we're going to unclip it and slide it out this way. And kind of go in underneath, push the clips in. So that one's loose. And go in and find all the clips. Might be easier to use the plastic trim tool to push the clip in, push it up. Slide it from underneath the windshield. Oop, I think this one clipped back in. Yep, it did. Make sure these stay clipped out. Put that aside. Plug the wiper motor. The lock for the clip is underneath the bottom. Squeeze it up. Pull the connector off. This wiring harness should be clipped into here. Somebody's had it apart before, so the clips are a little bit broken, but you'll have to pry this clip out of here. You'll have to either slide this off or cut the electrical tape. Be careful not to cut the wires. Somebody's already had this apart. It'll come off here. There should be a clip here, it's missing, and then there's this clip here. We just get the wiring harness out of the way. There's a 10mm bolt here, one here, and then one here and here that's holding the wiper transmission to the car. We'll use a 10mm socket, extension, and ratchet. Remove these bolts. We'll lift the wiper transmission out of the car. It's sitting on a stud just under here, so we'll pull that off. We need to remove the lower cowl panel. There's 9 10mm bolts holding it in place. We need to remove all these bolts and then slide it out of the engine compartment. Use a 10mm socket, extension, and ratchet. Clearance. I'm going to remove this bracket. There's 2 10mm bolts. Lift it out of the engine compartment. Flop these down and over. My self-clearance. I'm going to spray some rust penetrant on the top of these strut bolts while we have access to it with all these cowl panel off. You can use a small pry bar, or you can use a large flat bladed screwdriver. I'm going to pop the wheel cover off. You can use a 21mm socket, a large breaker bar, loosen the lug nuts of the vehicle on the ground so the wheel doesn't turn. Raise and support your vehicle with a jack and jack stands, but we're going to use our 2-post lift. The vehicle in the air, the lug nuts are loose. I'm going to use the socket to finish taking the wheel and tire off. Remove the sway bar link, spray some rust penetrant on the top nut. It's a 17mm nut. I'm going to try to break it free first. It might want to spin on the ball joint part, so there is a way to counter hold it. But typically before I try to counter hold it, I like to try to break it free a little bit. So it started to move, and then now it's spinning on the ball joint part. But I did free it up a bit. We're going to take a 6mm hex drive on the breaker bar, put it in here to counter hold it. Now loosen the nut. It's possible that these could be so rusted together that you may have to cut the sway bar links off. If you're replacing the strut, you should have a new sway bar link on hand in case you destroy it while you're removing it. This one came off really nicely. Pull it right out. You need to remove the bracket that's holding on the rubber brake hose and the ABS wire to the strut body. There's a 12mm bolt here. It goes through, so I'm going to spray some rust penetrant on the back side of it, remove the bolt, and pull the whole bracket off. Use a 12mm box wrench to loosen it. I'll switch to a ratcheting wrench. Bracket off. Just be careful of your ABS wire and your hose. I'm going to use this clip prying tool to pull the clip that's holding the ABS wire into the strut body out of there. Just pry it out. Put these aside. You need to remove the 2 strut mounting bolts on the top and the bottom here. Both the nut and the bolt head are 22mm. I'm going to loosen on the nut, and then I may need to counter hold the bolt afterwards. I'm going to start by spraying some rust penetrant on them. Use a 22mm socket and a long breaker bar. Loosen these up. Careful not to bash this into your fender. These are moving nicely. So now the bolt's starting to move. I'm going to switch to a small ratchet because I don't need the leverage anymore. I'm going to counter hold the bolt Loosen this up. And do the same for the other bolt. Remove the nut from the other bolts. I have to wiggle the knuckle a little bit, get the bolts to come apart. This will separate. Just like that. Okay. Loosen the 3 nuts at the top of the strut. They're 14 millimeter. I'd get them all loose first, and then remove 2 of them, and leave 1 still attached because the strut will start to lower, and you want to be able to hold on to it so it doesn't fall. Get this nut off here. So now it's just hanging on by 1 nut. So I'm going to reach underneath my other hand, hold on to the strut so it doesn't move around too much. Finish loosening this nut. So take this nut off. Take this plate out of here. Pull the strut out. Here's our original strut assembly we pulled from our vehicle. And our brand new assembled strut assembly from 1AAuto.com. You don't have to swap the spring to a new strut. This is ready to go, ready to be installed. It does have a little warning here. You should always do these in pairs. The warning just tells you that since these are new springs, the vehicle may sit higher and the spring will eventually settle with the weight of the vehicle. Comes with new mounting hardware. There's also a warning here. You do not need to loosen this nut that's inside here. Leave it alone. This is ready to go, ready to be installed. It'll fit great and work great for you. We're going to install our new strut. We'll go up from the bottom. Kind of lined up. Then I'll go up top. Get one of these nuts captured. Get these other 2 nuts captured. Don't forget to reinstall that plate. Part of your cowl panel mounts to this. Tighten these nuts up. The new hardware is a 15 millimeter nut versus a 14, the original. Tighten them up evenly. They are self-locking. I did have to switch to a deep socket as the studs come through. Once I feel them get tight, then I'll stop. Put the knuckle back into the strut. You may have to lift up on the knuckle. Slide it in here. There it is. Put the bolt in. Whichever one goes in easier first. Get the other one started. There we go, that one's going in. Just have to wiggle the knuckle around. Get the 2 nuts back on here. When the nuts started, we'll use that to draw them in. Counter hold the bolt and tighten the nut. Then counter hold the bolts and use a torque wrench. Torque the nuts and the strut bolts to 177 foot-pounds. Do that for both of them. Once it clicks, you're all set. All right, put the brake line back in place on the bracket. Just kind of slides up behind here. There's keys that it sits into. like that. This bracket goes on top of it. Install the original bolt. Tighten this up. If I feel it get tight, I'll stop. And don't forget to clip this back into the strut, your ABS wire, so it's not hanging loosely. Reinstall your sway bar link. We're using a new sway bar link, but if you're reusing your old one, the procedure will be exactly the same. Tighten it down. It is a self-locking nut. You can see it's sort of oval. It may start to turn the mounting stud that goes into the ball joint for the sway bar link. And when it does, I'll counter hold it to finish tightening it up. But for now, I'll just tighten it as is. Once it gets down to being fairly tight, I'll come back and torque it. Torque the sway bar link upper nut to 55 foot-pounds. Once it clicks, you're all set. Do the same. Reinstall the wheel. Start the lug nuts by hand. These lug nuts do have a shoulder on them. The opening in the wheel is a little bit bigger, so you might have to line it up and just kind of fiddle with the wheel a little bit while you're tightening these down. Gonna use the socket, snug these down. When I'm done, I'll lower the vehicle to the ground and torque them to spec. I'm gonna torque the lug nuts in a cross pattern to 76 foot-pounds. Reinstall the wheel cover, line up the hole for the valve stem, and then snap it in place. Got our lower part of the cowl panel, the steel piece. These little air guides are folded over so they'll fit under the windshield. Slide it into place. Start reinstalling the bolts. I'll just go along and start them all by hand, and then I can come back with the socket and ratchet and tighten them all. Push up that door, snap it in place. If it'll get tight, I'll stop. Clip this little door back. Tighten this one up. Install the support bracket. It's got a little tab that fits in there. This bolt caught here first. Reinstall the wiper transmission. So this little pin here is going to go into this rubber grommet up here. Push it up into place. I'll push it into that rubber grommet. Wants to pop out, so let's see. Took it off. I'm going to push it onto here, and then we can hook it in this way, just like that. And line it up with the mounting holes. Got our bolts. Get this one started. Start the other ones. Tighten these all up. Feel them get tight, and I'll stop. Reinstall the harness for the wiper motor. So this clip is kind of broken, but it does go in here. There's a missing clip here. You clip it back into place. This goes through this opening here. This is normally clipped into here. And then there's a final clip here. And then of course, you plug it in, keyed, only go on one way. It will click when it locks in place. So the plastic upper cowl cover, it's got some little tabs here. They're going to slide underneath the windshield, the edge of it, and then clips in the front that will clip down into the metal. So you have to get up into position, put it over the wiper arms, and we're going to slide it up, push it along the edge and slide it over the glass like that, and then it will clip down into place. Place your push clips. Do that for both sides. Clip these little corner pieces back in place, so that part will go underneath the windshield, and these will clip into the plastic here. Slide them underneath, clip them in place. Do the same for both sides. With the passenger side wiper arm in place, there was a little dust line here where the wiper blade was, so I'll use that as a reference point. Roughly right about there. There's some spring tension to this, it's pushing it back up, but I'll install the nuts. I'll just tighten these down until they get tight. I don't want to break off the studs off the wiper transmission. Reinstall the driver's side wiper, arm and blade. You could do this with the hood down, or the hood up, it's all right. Just get it in place. Reinstall the nut, tighten it up. If I feel it get tight, I'll stop. I don't want to break the stud off. And reinstall the cap. Just pushes into place.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.